Alright guys, how's it going? It's been a controversial start to the week, with a really controversial video, Intel versus AMD 2018. But probably the most controversial thing about this was that I ran a sponsored advert for an ICO, an initial coin offering based on the Ethereum network. Now obviously I know that cryptocurrency is a controversial topic, however I was quite surprised by just how controversial this has been, and also the variety of reasons for why. If you've ever sent a comment into the channel, then you'll know that there's a very good chance that I will respond to it, and I'll quite happily chat away and debate stuff, and I'll just argue with you if I don't agree. That's just the Scotsman in me, and I've been doing quite a lot of arguing this week. It's all absolutely fine. To me, it's part of the social aspect of the channel. What I've decided to do here is just go over one or two of these comments and explain how I see this whole thing, the whole cryptocurrency world, and touching on stuff like investments as well and mining. So let's just get started with one of the comments. So Pleasure Kevin says, advertising ICOs when AMD is suffering from miners. What? And my response to that was, well, record GPU profits are a strange definition of suffering. I'm not entirely sure if it was a record GPU profit in fact, but I do know that AMD made some pretty decent graphics money in the third quarter, which to many people was very strange because, Vega didn't really seem to be that great, but Vega's been doing fine and they continue to sell more Polaris graphics cards to miners. And end the sentence with, that should be they, suffered first time for sure, but they're making money on it now. And I actually talked about this in my video, Something Wrong at Radeon. In that video, I talked about how AMD got themselves into trouble during the period of their Hawaii GPUs, that is the R9290, R9290X. These cards were snapped up by cryptocurrency miners, but then the Bitcoin crash happened and the cards were then thrown onto the used market, at lower prices of course, and what happened was AMD ended up with a ton of unsold inventory. They simply could not sell any graphics cards. It was a perfect storm because Nvidia had just released the GTX 970 as well, and people lost their minds over that graphics card. So AMD had built many graphics cards only to get hit really hard on 2 or 3 different fronts. So they lost money for sure on the first really big mining boom for Bitcoin. But this time around it's been Ethereum, and the difference this time has been AMD has managed it better. So no, AMD is not actually suffering from mining anymore. They suffered the first time and now they have passed the suffering on to us. The consumers are the ones that are now suffering about mining. Now, another viewer, not a stupid name too, says, why am I promoting a thing related to cryptocurrency when it's the cause of the increasing prices on GPUs? For people on a budget that can't afford expensive PC parts, it's stopping them from being able to get a decent gaming PC. My response to which was, I gave up caring about the whack GPU market a year ago. Some of you maybe have noticed that. I simply no longer care about it. And we deserve these prices because we weren't smart enough to keep the gamers on top. That is how I feel about it. It is the gamer's fault that the market is the way it is. And what Not a Stupid Name 2 says afterwards is true. Not everybody should be punished because of it. And everybody should be able to get, at the very least, a decent mid-range gaming PC, but it's not at all feasible. And I do sympathise. I really do sympathise with that, but I also gave up caring about it. Because what it really comes down to is my final sentence here. What the gaming market is actually missing, what gamers miss, is the bargain basement prices of AMD graphics cards, because that is what we got used to over years and years. AMD would bring out a perfectly decent graphics card, yet it simply would not sell in the same numbers of the Nvidia card, and I continued with this same line with the next poster. Blaz120GL, adored. In my humble opinion, you should not give your name to such context. I like your content, but I'm not going to watch this one. GPU mining has made a lot of damage to the VGA industry this year. I hope you understand my stance. To which I respond, for me, the damage to the graphics market is caused by consumer stupidity, not crypto. And Blaz goes on to talk about how Ethereum was designed to be mined with AMD GPUs, and how AMD is basically taking advantage of that. And my response to that was, yeah, but the reason AMD is taking advantage of that is because they are getting fair payment, which is something they don't get from consumers. And I don't like it, but I'm in no doubt that we deserve it. The simple reality of this is AMD is getting paid by miners, they are not getting paid by consumers. If you're a business, that is the biggest no-brainer decision ever. But I continued on this discussion, and at the end of it, I basically laid out what I believe is the root cause of the high prices in the gaming graphics market. And I said that it's down to 2 factors. One is that AMD has to keep the supply low because they can't rely on Ethereum not collapsing. Like what happened with Bitcoin in 2015. So rather than AMD really taking advantage of this, they need to manage supply better than what they managed the last time. As I said, if they don't, they'll be left with a bunch of unsold cards, just like what happened with Hawaii. And the second factor is that due to constrained AMD supply, Nvidia cards are also worth it to the miners. So the prices of Nvidia cards get pushed up too. Because what it really comes down to here is, if AMD thought that they could get a fair price, and I am talking the same price of what Nvidia gets for cards like the GTX 1060, which outsells AMD 5 to 1 in the gaming market, against the RX 580, outselling 5 to 1. If AMD were not faced with that situation, then they would be able to increase production of the graphics cards. And even if Ethereum collapsed, they would still be able to get a fair price. The problem here is, over years and years and years, the AMD cards were not selling at a fair price. They were selling faster cards for lower prices. And again, what people are missing now is the cheap AMD graphics cards. And that was never a sustainable model. AMD were losing money on graphics cards, and Nvidia were getting less because they did have to reach a certain price point due to the very cheap AMD cards. Now that there is no such thing as a very cheap AMD graphics card, there is nothing holding Nvidia in check either. This is why the gaming graphics market is the way it is. No, AMD is no longer suffering from miners. They have passed on that suffering to us, the consumers. I told you last year, prepare to bend over because we're going to get shafted during the GPU war is over video, and that's exactly what is happening today. Now, another comment came from Spencer Reynolds, who said, "Great video, but he, like others, is concerned about me advertising a cryptocurrency IPO on my channel because I know that cryptocurrencies are used to fund criminal enterprises all over the world, including drug smuggling, human trafficking, child pornography, organised crime, weapons dealers. They've all turned to cryptocurrencies to hide their financial dealings from authorities. And for the sake of my integrity, I'd suggest you stay away from them." To which I respond, well, money is used to fund an awful lot more criminal enterprises all over the world and has been for millennia, which is a fact. Way more money is spent on illegal purposes than Bitcoin transactions ever were. And as I say, nobody's staying away from money though. With that said, I'll be thinking more about future ads. Spencer goes on to talk about how it's difficult to catch the criminals. For example, Al Capone, he was done for tax evasion, not racketeering. And because cryptocurrencies are anonymous and untraceable, criminals have got a big advantage over law enforcement. Now, again, I respond in rather typical fashion. In the comments, I possibly come off as an extremist. But what I said is, I'm a root cause person. The problem in every case that Spencer's mentioned here, it's not the actual currency, it's the criminals. And they'd still be doing what they're doing without crypto because they were doing it before crypto was ever in the news. And then I say, I'd line them up and shoot them in the head. We are talking about some pretty low scum of the earth type people here. Drug smugglers, human traffickers, child pornographers, etc. Yeah, these people are lost to society and they will never be anything except a massive drain. But I go on with saying that after that, we'd have no criminals to abuse something that can also be used as a force for good. And if we did do that, would crypto still be bad? And the obvious answer to that is no, because there is nothing inherently bad about cryptocurrency. That's how I think, and we cannot allow technology to be held back just because some have the ability to pervert it. We need to deal with the root cause. And this is something that I believe in. I would never allow any technology to be held back for the sake of stuff like religious purposes or because criminals are making use of it. There is nothing inherently wrong with the technology. As usual, it is the people, and we need to deal with them. So the last thing, and probably the most important thing, is cryptocurrency just all one big scam? I did a few checks on this today, and over at debate.org, the question of is Bitcoin a scam has 49% saying yes and 51% saying no. So I guess I'm finally starting to understand why there is so much controversy over this. It just depends on who you ask. And it's a very interesting question because I was around when Bitcoin first came on the scene. What was it, 2009, was it? It seems longer ago than that though. Yeah, there we go. The beginning of January 2009, 8 years ago. It does seem longer than that. Back then I was following forums very closely and some people started talking about this Bitcoin mining thing and I read up a bit on it and I came to the conclusion that this is a scam. This is a complete scam. There is no way that this will ever take off. I remember back in 2010 when Laszlo offered to pay 10,000 bitcoins for a couple of pizzas, and it made the news because this was the first actual transaction, real life transaction, and this guy got his 2 pizzas for his 10,000 bitcoins. We can see here that Bitcoin back then was less than 1 cent. But a couple of months later, in only 5 days, the price grew by 1,000%. And then at the beginning of February, Bitcoin took parity with the US dollar. Now I'm watching all this and thinking, I should be getting in on this, but I'm not a gambler at all. I don't gamble whatsoever. I don't own any shares. I don't even buy a single lottery ticket. It's just something that I don't do. I've never fully understood the whole thing about it because in general, gambling is what we used to say in Scotland is gambling is a mug's game because the bookie always wins, and it doesn't matter what scene you apply that to. It's the person who starts it, they're the one that wins, and the people who put money into it generally lose. That's how I see gambling, and that's how I see Bitcoin. And for the longest time, I just continued to believe this is a scam and it's gonna burst. I did go as far as getting a Bitcoin wallet on my hard drive, but I never traded any. But at the end of 2013, there was a story that stuck with me, which is why I recall it now. But some guy also had a wallet on his hard drive, and I think it was his girlfriend throughout the hard drive that had his Bitcoin wallet on it. And the price of Bitcoins had risen by so much that hard drive was worth £4 or £5 million. And this guy hired a company to try to dig this out of the rubbish tip because it was worth so much money. So that one stuck with me because back in 2009, I could very easily have had 10,000 Bitcoins, same as the pizza guy, and it would have been worth a fortune only 4 years later. Millions of pounds, in fact. Now, some of you remember the Mt. Gox fiasco, where they basically went bust. And this is one reason why Bitcoin took such a hammering in 2015. My best friend lost money in this, or lost Bitcoins in this, and so did an awful lot of people. And that just shows the perils of investment, especially in something that is newish, and inherently volatile, like Bitcoins can be. But does one bad apple mean that, the whole batch is bad? I don't believe that. But at this time, I was starting to think this is the end for Bitcoin now. Make no mistake about it, by the time Mt. Gox went bust, I would have easily have been a multi-millionaire had I got in at the start. And I would for sure have cashed out at least some of that long before this happened. But that's just smart investing. But it wasn't the end of Bitcoin. Far from it. After the Mt. Gox thing, the price did fall to less than half, from $750 down to $340 at one point. But that was April 2014, and now at the end of November 2017, one Bitcoin is worth $8,000. $8,000 for one Bitcoin. The guy that spent 10,000s on a couple of pizzas, how does this guy feel? He probably feels alright actually, because I'm sure he had a lot more than 10,000. At least I hope for his sake he did. So if Bitcoin is a scam, then it is a massive, massive scam, and many, many people are getting very, very rich on it. And yes, there's going to be losers. There's always losers in this. But there are always ways to mitigate your losses as well. And I just said I was there at the beginning of Bitcoin, so obviously I was there at the beginning of Ether. I'm watching the forums over Anantech and they start talking about this, and it became very, very clear to me that Ether was the next big thing. Bitcoin had already hit the ASIC miner stage, so all the graphics card miners needed something else, and they all piled into Ethereum. And I'm watching it over months, in fact, thinking, why am I not getting in this? And it goes back to that thing of, I'm not really a gambler, I'm not really an investor. I should have been mining the crap out of it back then though, but I just didn't do it. For other reasons, and we can all see what happened. Ethereum basically became almost the next Bitcoin, and this story could continue because once Ethereum hits the ASIC miner stage, I see no great reason why it wouldn't go exactly the same way as Bitcoin. Bitcoin price continues to rise and rise and rise. The same thing could happen to Ethereum. It could go the opposite way as well. There are always spin-offs in fledgling industries like this. And right now, these ICOs, initial coin offerings, they've got a really bad reputation because there are a lot of scams out there. Even just yesterday, the Ethereum-based ICO Confido, they vanished after raising $374,000, which is a lot of money to just run away with. And it's not the only one. There have been more than one ICOs which have gone bust or just vanished as a pure scam. And the more this happens, the more people say, well, ICOs are just scams. But people also said that about Bitcoin, and people will say that about anything new. It's just human nature. If something can be abused by humanity, then we will find a way to do it. I had a discussion on Reddit as well, where I basically went over what I just talked about. I regret not buying into Bitcoins years ago because I was worried it was a scam or a fad. And I regret not buying into Ethereum as well. But in both cases, that was my choice. Had I done so, I would be a multi-millionaire by now, but nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? And that is what it comes down to. If you're a gambler, then you know the rules. If you're interested in any of this stuff, go into it with your eyes wide open. Research is everything. Make sure it's right for you before you commit any kind of money to it. But the most important thing would be, do not ever commit everything to the one venture. Like the topmost dog said, he's actually really curious, and my response is just make sure that you read up on it fully. And that is what I would say for anything. Do your research and see if it is for you. And the topmost dog says, look, don't worry, any investments I make in atypical schemes are trialed with a small amount first, and he knows too many people who have been bitten in the ass. Most investors go through that phase of being bitten in the ass, but hopefully everybody learns. For me, the thing about Bitcoin and all cryptocurrency is, first of all, it's technology, which is the most important thing. The thing that drives my life, in fact. And you'll find out why in a future video. You'll be surprised, I'm sure. And I really like the thought of tech people. That is us. You watching this, me. I believe that we should be the ones in control of all of this stuff, all the money and all of that, because I believe that we would make better decisions. But that's a different topic. The more power we have, the better I feel it is overall, but especially in terms of human progression. I do not like banks. I'm sure it's clear to all of you that I am very anti-corporate. And when you're like that, you also tend to be anti-bank. And the banks are getting worried, very, very worried about cryptocurrency. Of course they are, because they are losing power. The way I see it is, going back to Pleasure Kevin's comment, a good comment by Marcel here, who says, you can hate miners all you want, and you can choose to lock yourself off and live in fear of the future. But the future does not care, and crypto is the future of money. It is simply too powerful. Not only as an investment opportunity, but also as a way of finally circumventing traditional finance infrastructure. And Marcel goes on to say that crypto is the most interesting technology since the internet. Could well be. And there is a lot of hype around it, and there will be a bubble, almost certainly guaranteed. But a lot of people and companies already made fortunes investing in crypto, and it is drawing ever more people in. And the big thing for me here is, the bigger it gets, the more known it gets, the more accepted it becomes, the more will be invested into it. We cannot be scared of people abusing it, and we cannot bury our heads in the sand and say, it's never gonna take off. It has already taken off and then some. Just use your brain. Diversify your portfolio. Don't put too much money into one thing. You should never put all your eggs in one basket. That is a golden rule of investing. Or just be like me and never venture anything and also never gain and end up with a bunch of regrets. I mean, the fact is, I have blown it big time on Bitcoin and Ethereum. But the next one, after Ethereum goes into the Bitcoin stage and all the GPU miners look to get onto something else new, when that happens, I am going to be in on it, at least as a miner. The one thing that I dislike about it is I am an environmentalist, and it is very difficult to be an environmentalist while burning a bunch of electricity mining GPUs, but it's all a trade-off. You have to decide what do you want more. And what I actually want more than anything else is power in our hands, as I just discussed. I want us to have the power, because once we've got the power, maybe we can do a better job of the environment than what the guys with the power are doing right now. I don't want to get too political. I've clearly been skirting it here in quite a few ways. I simply just wanted you to know how I feel about all of this. But also, very importantly, take the warning here that investing in cryptocurrency is inherently risky. But obviously, the rewards, as you have seen, are absolutely massive. And that's just how the investment scale goes. You get safe investments, you get a little return on them. You go after the risky investments, you could end up making a fortune. Or you could just end up losing it all. So keep that in mind. So to finish this one off, like I said at the start, I was surprised at the reaction and high level of controversy that my sponsored advert has caused. It's been too much, in fact, and based on feedback, I will not be getting involved in any sponsorship like this, at least not in the near future. If we get to that stage where crypto becomes accepted, completely accepted, and I believe and hope we will get there, then I will reevaluate that stance. But for now, I am treating this as a lesson learned, and I won't even be considering any more crypto sponsorship deals. What that means for the channel, the simple fact of the matter is the way I produce video, infrequent large videos, it simply does not pay. There is no money in doing that. At most, I can do 2 videos a week, and the overall channel revenue is lucky to scrape $300 per month. And it's true that I've got a very nice Patreon account. For somebody my size, the amount of patrons I have is phenomenal. And the last thing I want is to appear ungrateful here, because, this money really helps me out. On top of the channel money, on top of all the stuff like my Amazon affiliates, that kind of thing. Together, it is just about a reasonable living wage. But I'm also living in Sweden, which has high taxation and high living costs. So there will be more sponsorship deals. That's something that you're just going to have to live with. Hopefully in future, I'll be able to avoid some of the more controversial ones. I'll catch you later, guys.